But you can't always pinpoint the source of your stress. Sometimes it's just the feeling it takes over.
Oh, that's so true, right? Dr. Caroline Leaf has been researching the mind-brain connection since the 80s, and she joins us now with a 5-step process to clean up the mental mess that some of us carry around. Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much. Great to be with you.
So how do you describe a mental mess?
Well, it's that feeling when your mind feels chaotic and disordered and it starts disrupting your sleep, your work, your daily functioning. It just feels that this happens because every experience gets wired into the brain through the mind. The mind puts it in the brain, and then if it's a disordered or toxic experience, it goes into the brain in a very messy way. And that messiness is energy, and it basically influences and makes us feel really messy.
Interesting. So you have a 5-step plan for cleaning up a mental mess. What is that?
It's called the neurocycle, and what it does is enables you to identify the mess, and then once you've identified the mess, you embrace it, process, and reconceptualize, and all that fancy stuff basically rewires the neural network in the brain, and that makes you feel less messy. So the first step is called the gather awareness step, and that's simply a structured way, a simple way of identifying what I call the 4 signals of the mess. So looking at your emotions, your behaviors, your perspective, and your bodily sensations. Then you move to the next step, which is to reflect on those 4 signals. And as you reflect on those 4 signals that you've gathered, you ask yourself questions like, why am I feeling this? What's happening to me? Why am I having this behavior? Those 2 steps have pulled the thought into the conscious mind and weakened it. So now you can start actually changing what the structure looks like in your brain. So you're changing through directed neuroplasticity. The 3rd step is to write this down. Just literally pour what you've gathered and reflected on onto paper. No order, no organization, just pour it on. And when you do that, you're putting your mind and brain on paper, you're bringing order out of chaos, you're developing deep insight, and you're going to start seeing things that you didn't see before, which will then help you start finding the source of the messiness. And that's key, to find the source. You can't change what's happened to you, but you can change what it looks like inside of you. You can literally rewire your brain, which then influences how you plays out into the future, which brings us to step 4, which really now looks at what's on paper, which is what you gathered and reflected on, and all that messiness, and tries to make more order out of that. So you look for patterns, you look for triggers, you look for things that are like an antidote. The main question there is, this has happened, what can I do about it? And those all then bleed into the last, or lend into the last step, which is your active reach, which is a visualization or an action or a statement that you practice to help you keep wiring in the right direction and help you keep reconceptualizing in the right direction.
So are there a few common bad habits that just damage our mental health on a daily basis and we don't realize we're doing them?
Totally. The desire to suppress, like I don't want to deal with this stuff, that creates volcanoes inside of our brain and increases the mess. The other thing as well is if we see emotions or messiness, if we see it as bad, what's really important is to say it's okay to be a mess. The key is I need to manage my mess. So when we say, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with my brain, or I've got a brain disease, or I mustn't have this, and you're harsh and judgmental, then you avoid the messages that you can find inside of the emotions and the thoughts. So basically, emotions and intrusive thoughts are your new best friend to help rewire your brain.
Interesting. So is it possible to get rid of toxic habits?
Absolutely. 25 years of clinical practice and 38 years later, and thousands of testimonies, I can tell you that when you teach someone to mind manage, and you can teach a child as young as 2 to manage their mind through the neurocycle system, you can rewire the brain and the mind, and you use your mind to rewire the brain, and you can change how this plays out into your future.
How do you keep a small problem from spiraling out of control into a mental mess? Because sometimes those little things can eat you up even worse than big problems.
Well, they definitely like a volcano, and the volcano keeps erupting and we ignore it, and eventually it just explodes in our life. So to avoid that is to recognize the signals of coming out of the volcano. So it's to make a concerted effort to gather awareness of, how am I feeling? What is going on in my body? What am I saying, doing? What is my perspective? And then once you become aware, you want to then go through, you want to then process that and reconceptualize that. And that's what the neurocycle will help you do. So it's that awareness. It starts with that awareness, but you can't just have awareness. You have to go beyond, because if you're just aware, it can make you feel worse and more messy. So it's really important that you then go through the whole process of understanding and getting to a point where you can accept it. Can't change what's happened, but you can change what it looks like and how it plays out in the future.
All right. Doctor, thanks so much for taking time out to spend with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and for more mental health tips, follow the doctor on Instagram at Dr. Carolyn Leaf.